All right, so my first venture into painting my new Zine Charmy, of course, is going to be starting with the Start Collecting kit, more specifically the Pink Horrors. And looking at the theme that Citadel Games goes with for these, I don't really like this really pale pink bubblegum look, but I do want to stick with the pink scheme. And I am more of a fan of how this model looks, this big guy. He's one of the leaders in this box. So I'm going to try to replicate that a little bit more. Maybe not 100% completely, but I'm going to go more with him as opposed to these traditional lighter pink bubblegum looking dudes. Now, when I decided I was going to paint Zine, I really went back and forth on how I wanted to paint them. I really do want to try to up my painting skills, my painting game. In the past, if you watched any of my other little videos, I have mostly just used contrast paints, and these obviously would be very quick and easy to do with contrast paints with a little bit of extra on top of it. But I really want to kind of move past that, at least for this army. I do plan on taking them to a big tournament, and I want them to look good and more professional. So I deliberated on if I wanted to continue with the contrast and then just build up on top of the contrast, if I wanted to do traditional where you just layer paints. And it'll probably be a mix overall for the army as a whole. But for these guys, I figured, you know what? I really want to get better with my airbrush, and these would be a perfect model to practice on, since they're all mostly one color. And so that's what I'm doing. To start, I went ahead and decided to go with a zenithal highlighting. I kind of went back and forth on if the zenithal highlighting was even worth it or not, or if it would be better just to do a very overall solid light coat of like a very light or bright gray, or maybe even an off-white, just to help the pink pop more. I was afraid that'd be too bright, or maybe it wouldn't even be necessary, so I went ahead and did zenithal. Though part of me is wondering if maybe I should just gone with the whole, just a really bright light gray coat. I used these paints to do it. The German Panzer Gray is my primer, and then on top of it I went with the Ministranum Gray and the White Scar from Citadel Air. I haven't really decided yet if I like them or not. I've been having some trouble with them as far as them either being too watery or too kind of powdery. I did knock down the PSI, the pressure on my airbrush, to try to help with the powdery look. I usually paint like with a airbrush with a 25 PSI, but I went with more of a 15-18, and it seemed to help a little bit, but then I started having the runny issue, or maybe I'm getting it backwards, the other way around. Anyways, obviously I'm still learning with the airbrush, but overall I think it turned out okay, and I'll be airbrushing, you know, the pink and stuff on top of them, so I don't think it'll matter as much. But here's just a look at the results. I tried to go with a bit more of a lighter airbrushing as opposed to like a very deep dark contrast with, you know, maybe black at the bottom building all the way up, just because I do want the pink to pop a little better. But there's just an example of all my dudes airbrushed here. That way I can then start airbrushing the colors on them. Now, I already did a test model back here. He's more dark than I'd like, but I can always brighten him up with some layering on top of it. Now, I did him slightly different than I did these. On him, I put, after I did my base primer, my German Panzer, I did an underlighting where I sprayed from the bottom, and I did a purple, like a purple ink, to see if I could maybe get the pink to pop, if it would flow better. It was very dark when I sprayed on this model, and I just really didn't like how dark it was, so then I went behind it and tried to do just a brighter spray with my other purples. Sorry, it's not focusing very well. And this is the result. I do think it's darker than I may like. When I say darker, I mean duller. I would like a brighter pop, but overall I think it's okay considering it's my first shot at doing this sort of thing. So basically what I did with this guy is after I got him zenithaled, I did an all over very light airbrush glaze, I guess, of the Vorback red, I guess you can call it. And then on top of that, I did, basically I'm zenithaling again with these colors. So I did the Vorback, and then with the whatever little bit was left in there, I mixed in the pink horror. I didn't clean out the pot, I just mixed in the pink horror, which toned it down a little bit, and sprayed it at like a, not just a straight on like this, but slightly, I'm trying to think of what angle that is. 40 degree, I don't know, 60 degree. Y'all know what I'm talking about, but basically like an angle like this to get the overall. And then I just put in a little bit more pink horror to brighten it up some more, did it again. Then eventually I added in Emperor's Children into that and just went from straight up above. Sorry for the child. Kylie, shh. Yeah, straight up above, and I just played with it. There's multiple layers on here, just building up from the Vorbach to the pink horror to the Emperor's Children, starting with all over, then at slight angles until finally I was up above. The next thing I did is I got this Phoenician purple here, and I just lightly sprayed the tip of this top head tail, whatever you want to call it, this hand, and then this other hand. And I think it turned out pretty good. It's hard to see it on the camera. It looks much better in person, I think, but it's got a nice little bit of a gradient there. It's again not as poppy as I would like, but overall I like it, and I'm kind of afraid to keep messing with it. I'm afraid I'm gonna mess it up. But I'll play around with the rest of these models too. Thankfully, because they're demonic horrors in my mind, I don't think they need to be completely uniform. They can be a little differing. But yeah, that's where I came to. Finally, the last bit I did is I took this Kerberg Crimson shade and I put it just in the cracks. I'm trying to get it to show up on here. I don't know if you can see it. A little messy in some places, but basically I thinned it down a little bit with some medium. That way it wasn't as dark and thick, and then I just drew it a couple times in the crevices around the muscles just to try to make them look like they have a little bit more definition, as opposed to wash the whole thing, because I didn't want, you know, messy pooling areas, and then in my mind it would be just like using a contrast paint. So that's what I tried to do here. Just pick out the muscles. It's a little messier than I would like, but I think overall it looks pretty good. And then when I start adding in picking out like the armor and the tongue and the eyes and the teeth and all that, I think it will really help everything pop out. And I may go back and just do a very light painted layer on the topmost kind of raised muscles, especially around like his face, if it will focus in. Haven't really decided yet, but this is where I'm at currently with my test model. I'm gonna go ahead and camera's freaking out with trying to focus in everywhere. I'm gonna go ahead and get the rest of these boys sprayed up to look somewhat like this one. May differentiate a little bit with the purple blending, or the purple on the hands and the tails. May go brighter, may go darker with the pinks. I don't know yet. We'll just see how they all turn out. But that's what I'm gonna go ahead and do, get all of them at the same level as this one, and then we'll go from there and see where we end up. Okay, so I'm gonna give a shot at trying to show my airbrushing of this. Remember, I'm very much new at this, so don't take this as an expert guide. So I'm starting with my darkest base color, this Citadel Gal Vorbak red. It's a very pretty, kind of a more magenta purpley color, maybe wine color. Is that the best term for that? It's a cross between purple and maroon. I'm just gonna say wine color. Now, as I did do a zenithal, I want this to be more of a very light, thin glazing airbrush. So the way I understand it is you need to make it very thin. So I added quite a bit of the Vallejo airbrush thinner to it to thin it out, because though it's an airbrush paint, it's still pretty thick. I think even if I didn't want a thin glaze, I would still want to add some thinner to it. And just get it down here in the pot so it's nice and thin. I couldn't tell you the ratio. I think you pretty much have to play with it, and because all paints are different, and then the consistency you want is probably different, especially for your brush. But let's go ahead and start spraying some of this on here. And then I do the put thinner in the pot, then slowly start adding paint in the pot and mix it up with a brush method. I used to use, like, do it in a little shot glass cup or something like that, but I don't know, I just had a lot of trouble trying to get the right consistency and clumping, and then having to, I always made more messes, and I felt like I was wasting a lot of the paint in the actual cup. I think I like just doing it directly in the pot better. All right, so let's try this. Let's see if I can do this correctly. Sorry if the angle's not great. I'm not able to really see what y'all are seeing as I do this. I'm just going to very lightly start spraying this all over. I'm going to do a full coverage. Sorry for the compressor. Pretty good. It's pretty wet. I'm probably applying too much in one go, but I'm okay if it runs a little bit in the cracks, as it's just gonna darken up those cracks. This is my base color, so I want it, this is the darkest color I'm applying to it. Pretty happy with how that looks. Darker from underneath. You almost don't even see the purple. Add a little bit more of a coat here. And then brighter, more purpley up top. All right, I think that's pretty good for my first model. We'll let him dry up a bit. I might go back later after that's dried, apply a little bit more, but it's just the base coat. It's gonna be covered up with the other pinks, so I'm not too worried about it. And the airbrush I'm using is a Iwata Eclipse HBCS. Pretty cheap, basic model as far as airbrushes go. Not, you know, the cheapest out there, but by no means the nicest, most expensive. I can actually pick this up at our local craft store, Hobby Lobby, or you can get it on Amazon. I opted to go with a cheaper, more base model to start with because I didn't know if I'd even like airbrushing. I am currently researching and watching videos for my next airbrush that I get, because I do want to get a nicer one. I just haven't quite pulled the trigger yet. So if you have recommendations, feel free to put them in the comments. I get a lot of I see a lot of people using Badgers, so I've been looking at those, but we'll see. Pretty wet. more wet than I would like, but that's okay. It actually looks kind of cool. All right, moving on to the next one. And I'll just go ahead and apply a base coat to all these. I'm not gonna have y'all watch me do that. That'd be pretty boring. So I'll finish these up off camera and then show you what they look like. And we'll go from there. Okay, so here they are all sprayed up with their first base coat of this stuff, Vorback Red. So I went ahead, after I sprayed them down once, I went back after they dried and did another coat. And I found that, of course, with the, the thinner the paint, on these first ones that I started doing, it was running. So I just need to stop. I need to apply lighter pressure on the trigger and then hold it further back, and that definitely helped. But here's basically what they look like now. They still have a little bit of the zenithal gradient from below. They look really dark. You can barely see the purple tint to it. And from top, you got that kind of nice pink purple. So that's kind of where they're at currently. That's what they look like. Now it's time to add the next layer to it. So I'm just gonna have a hint of this stuff in the pot. I went ahead and cleaned out my airbrush. Normally, because since I was doing a large batch and I'm recording it, normally I just doing one at a time, and I have this, and then whatever's left, I add the other stuff to it, but I'm doing a little differently here. I'll put just a teeny tiny bit of this stuff back into the pot, but mostly just have the pink core for this next layer. So let's go ahead and get to that. All right, so let's go ahead and try this out. This is kind of what it looks like in the pot. Maybe slightly darker than this. Hard to tell, but that's where we're at. Okay, so I'm not gonna go dead on, just maybe slightly above center, if that makes sense. Just real light. Concentrating more kind of towards the center of him, his face. So he's still very dark from underneath, but quite a bit lighter from up top. I don't want him this dark from underneath, so I am going to go ahead and break what I said and just very lightly spray some under. And this is what I'm talking about, where I probably didn't want to do the zenithal with these guys and just go with an overall light gray prime so they're not as dark. Okay, so there's him versus, say, like this guy. I don't know if you can see a whole lot of difference, but there's a bit of a difference there. And I'll go ahead and get the rest of these sprayed up. I'm just gonna go ahead and spray all over, but I'm doing it lightly. I'm not doing a full coverage.
Hi, Mommy.
Hi, baby.
Good morning.
Morning. All right, and I'll finish these up, and then we'll pop to the next stage. So at this point, I've just done the initial base with the Vorback Red, and then I did a second spray over with these two mixed together, Pink Horror and Vorback Red. I'm probably saying it wrong. So that's what it kind of looks like at the moment. Still pretty dark, but a little bit lighter. We're getting there. I'm just wanting to build like a slow gradient up And this is why I'm thinking that it's probably not necessarily to do the zenithal highlighting before doing all this, is that's just added extra steps. I think I end up losing a good bit of the zenithal. But I could be wrong. Maybe one of these days I'll do a video where I experiment like zenithal versus no zenithal on this. But yeah, so let's go ahead. Here's this. It's just straight. Now it's just straight pink horror. Then I'm gonna be spraying on it slightly above center. I'm not doing this. I'm just going slightly above, and I'm actually gonna stick to it this go around. Make sure we're good. Just start spraying in. Just slowly making it brighter. I don't know if you can see one versus the other if the camera's even in the camera angle, but slightly brighter while still dark underneath. And I'm wanting it to be brighter center as opposed to in the arms, as if the magic that is born them is coming from inside. I could also just be talking out my ass. I have no idea. There we go. And I've attached these guys to their bases with just some sticky tack because I plan on doing the bases later, and I feel like it would be easier to do them with the model not attached, which is a different tactic than I usually use. Basing is by far, when I say basing, I'm talking about doing this down here, the actual base. My least favorite part of painting miniatures for some reason. Okay. I'd like to thank y'all for joining me on this video as I bumble through this, learning how to airbrush. I love any sort of pointers you have to give me so I can get better at it. I'm just kind of using things I've watched in videos of airbrushing, and then also just kind of experimenting as I go. Liking it so far. Almost done. Got a couple more of these guys to do. This part anyways. The next step.
Hi, Mommy.
Hi, baby.
Hey, Mommy.
Good morning. Let me spray your hand. Boop.
Thank you.
My hands are getting completely covered. This is probably why you should wear gloves, but I forgot to go buy some. That's okay. It washes off.
Orange.
Still very much a gradient there. Let me get a little bit more
Yeah,
from the
yeah,
front.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh, and I've run out of paint in my pot. All right. Hopefully that's enough for you to see that step. And we'll be jumping back in once my last two guys are done to do the next spray over. Much lighter, brighter now. Still pretty dark underneath. Decent gradient, I think. Or at least it looks good to me anyways. We're gonna go ahead and add the next layer. Now this one, I'm going to go top down. Just straight from above. And it's straight Emperor's Children. It's a layer quite a bit lighter Well, I don't know if you can really tell from the pots here, but it is definitely lighter than the pink core. I feel like it's quite noticeable to me, but it may not be on the camera. Anyways, you could choose to go like another kind of in-between step where you do a mixture of pink core and Emperor's Children, just to add in a little bit more of a settled gradient, but I'm just going to jump right in and do Emperor's Children from straight above. Tilt it a little bit just to kind of highlight in on the face. I don't know if you can see kind of the difference between those. I feel like that's quite a bit brighter than that one. All right, so there's that one done, and we'll go ahead and layer in on top of the rest of these here. Straight top down. No, baby. Sorry, sweetheart. And if you really wanted to make them even brighter and more pink, at least using the Citadel line, there is a brighter pink past the Emperor's Children. I'm blanking on its name, but I opted not to get it. There's also a dry brush, which I contemplated on getting. Really bright, like light pink. But I'm trying to stay away from the dry brushing and the contrast. Not that there's anything wrong with it. That's what I've always done up to this point, is contrast with dry brushing, maybe a little bit of edge highlighting and shading, but trying to do a little different this time. We'll see if it pays off. Last figure. The next step after this is going to be a little bit of a purple tint highlight to a couple of the arms and like a tail here and there. Alright, so that's that. I think I got them to where I want to be with the airbrush anyways, as far as the pink goes. Okay, so for this final airbrush step, for now anyways, I'm going to use the purple, using this Citadel Air Phoenician Purple. I don't know if I'm holding it so you can see it, but that's what it looks like in the pot. So I'm basically just going to use it to highlight some of the hands and like some of the tails. So let's see, and you have to be careful so you don't get it on the other bits. So we're gonna go ahead and go with this arm down here. Real gentle here. A little bit too close, causing it to... actually going to take the tip off of this. That tip. Drop it, of course. Okay. Alright. Real gentle on the trigger. If I spray too hard, I'm going to make it fly everywhere. We'll go ahead and get the tail. Probably had a little bit more thinner than I should. Bless you, baby.
Purple. It's purple. Purple.
Yeah, it's purple. No, baby.
No.
And let's see, what else do I want to do? I got the ends of the two tails. Maybe pull his tail up a little bit more. Bye-bye, baby. See you later, alligator. Let's see, what else? Let's do... mostly happy with that. Oops, got his bicep back there a little bit. It's fine. Okay, so there's that one. And I just play with it. There's not really, I don't have a method or rhyme or a reason. I'm just kind of playing at this point. I don't even know if it looks good, but we're just going for it. Probably need to thicken this up. Alright, that sit for a moment and go ahead and add a little more paint to the pot, and we'll get back to it. Alright, and here they are. I like them okay. Not too bad for my first attempt at something like this, I don't think. I think that's all I'm going to do with the airbrush at this time. This is my original model here. I'm just showing him compared to the others. Of course, he has the highlight, the little spot shading in the crevices, which I'm going to go through and do on these other guys here in a minute. But I think they're a little bit brighter than him, but that might just because they don't have shading and he does. I don't know. Move them aside. This is basically what we're looking at here. And shift down this. You can let me know what you think, if you think it's a cool, I guess, paint job or whatnot. Obviously they're not anywhere close to being done yet, but this is a really quick process though. Even though it was kind of multiple layers or whatever, it was very quick to do all of these. I feel like it would take way longer if I was doing the traditional method of painting a base on than doing layer upon layer upon layer. I think this goes much quicker. Whether it looks as good or not, I don't know, but not as quick as contrast paints, but definitely much cleaner, where I was able to at least get a good transition. Not so much of a good transition on this tail, but it's okay. Oops. Overall, I'm pretty happy with it, and I'll go through and shade it all. And we still have a good kind of darker on the bottom, right up top effect going on here. But yeah, I'll go ahead and start the shading process so we can look more like this guy here. Okay, so I figured I'd show you real quick what I'm talking about with the shading. So I'm using this Carroburg Crimson. I don't know if I'm holding it so you can see it. It's basically like a purple shade, purplish pink, and I'm cutting it with a medium. You can play around with it to see how much you want to cut it. I think it's too dark and probably, I don't know if it's the right term, as it is by itself, so I do like to cut it usually like kind of closer to like a 1-to-1 ratio. I think mediums, like the Citadel mediums, probably work best, like Lamium, I think is how you say it. But I suppose you could also try cutting it with water. I'm using a medium. So basically what I'm doing is I'm using a thinner tipped brush than I normally would for a shade. Just getting a little bit on the tip of the brush. And I'm basically just kind of coloring in the dips, the crevices around the muscles. And this is pretty light, not really seeing it show up here. I might want to add a little bit more shade to it. But I'm basically just kind of dabbing at it, and it's naturally falling, like flowing through the cracks. So I don't have to do too much coloring in, and just more almost dabbing, but making sure it doesn't pull out too much. And you may need to do this like more than once, just depending on how deep or dark you want those definitions around the muscle to be. So when it dries, you might need to apply another layer. But yeah, I'm just picking out the recesses. And I'll probably go in and either add some more of the shade to my mix because I have it too watered down, or I'll just do multiple layers. We'll see how it kind of goes. So right now it's very thin and it's just running where it wants. Not where it wants, through the cracks, but yeah, you know what I mean. Sorry if I'm holding it outside of y'all's view so you can see where I kind of just drew it in. It's looking kind of dark right now, but when it dries it will lighten up. I just find more recesses to kind of color it in. You could just go and bathe the figure in the wash like you normally might with these shades. If you do that, I do recommend you still kind of cut it a little bit with some medium. That way it's less prone to pulling. And it may even help with it may help diminish when you do airbrush. It kind of leaves, it obviously has an airbrush look to it. It leaves a bit of a very fine speckled gradient. Or maybe that's just me, but that would help smooth that out. But then you're gonna have the opposite problem of having it look a little messy, like splotchy. So I'm just coloring in the cracks instead. And I'll see how it dries. If it's not dark enough, then I'll go back again, like I said, and re-highlight the cracks. But I think it turned out looking pretty good on my figure that I've already done. This is probably the slowest process so far in all of this. It's a little bit more tedious. It's very tempting to just go and just slather on this stuff all over and not worry about painting in the cracks. But I've seen other people do this in their videos and I liked the effect and it does look cleaner. So I'm trying to be patient and do it this way. And y'all can let me know in the comments your own experiences with doing this and if it's, you know, worth it to do this more controlled approach or just to slather it on. I like it though, I think it looks good. Because when you airbrush, that is the problem with airbrushing. That's why I did the zenithal hoping that it would help, is you tend to wash out the cracks and crevices. You don't have that definition. The hand is so textured that I am just bathing the hand on this one. It's fine. But yeah, so I'm just gonna go through and color in everything. I'm gonna do a little less controlled dabbing approach on the face, just because there's again a lot of texture on the face. Less potential for pooling on flat surfaces. It's so texturized. All right, so I'm going to go through and do this on all the models, and eventually when they dry they should look something like this one here, if you can actually see it on the camera, and I'll show y'all the end result. This one's quite a bit darker than this one. It's because I did him as my test model and did not do him as bright as these others, so he's gonna be darker, but I think that's okay. All right, check back with y'all in a minute. Okay, and here they are, all shaded, or spot shaded, or however you're supposed to call it. And just take a little bit of a closer look. Some of it's a little messy, a little messier than I would like, but overall I think I like the effect. And of course this one on the far right is my original one, and it is a bit darker than all the others, but I think it's fine. I think it blends in fine. And I think once I start painting the rest of the little bits on these guys, the tongues, the teeth, the metal rings and cuffs, bracelets, and some of them have feathers and flames, I think they'll really pop. Overall, I'm pretty happy with the result. And y'all can let me know if you think it looks pretty, if you think it looks good too, if it was worth all the steps and extra effort, and that one keeps falling, to do it this way. If you know of a better way to do it, please let me know in the comments. Always willing to learn how to improve my craft. But there you go. And next step is to start painting the little extra bits on these guys. So we'll get to that next.